Adam at Trump Nation here, and there's a piece that came out by David P. Goldman, who is a Cruz supporter, no question about it, but who is brilliant and whose opinion I respect a lot. And you all should be aware of this because, you know, if you can't handle the arguments of Cruz people right now, what are you going to do? Because it's going to be at a whole other level with Hillary or Biden or whoever the Democrats stick against, possibly Trump in November, though the favorite, according to betting now, is now Marco Rubio. We shall see. That's not why we're talking here. I am going to go through this column, which, first of all, you should turn this off and just read it on your own. But if you don't, I'm going to read you pretty much the whole thing here. Some of you, especially on a Friday, may be driving somewhere for the weekend, and you're not going to read it, or you're walking your dog, or jogging, or whatever. So here's the text. But first choice should be to read it at Asia Times. You can Google Asia Times, the new Donald Trumpelstiltskin Spengler, or go to atimes.com and then find Spengler in the columnists. It's his most recent thing. David P. Goldman, here's what he writes. Donald Trump's claim that Senator Ted Cruz won the Iowa caucuses by vote fraud denoted a tantrum of fabulous proportions. The fable that comes to mind is that of Rumpelstiltskin, who, it will be remembered, spun straw into gold in return for the firstborn child of the boastful miller's daughter. Again, I am just the messenger here, but you got to take David Goldman's opinion seriously. Back to what he writes. Only if the girl could learn his name would the evil dwarf relinquish his claim. She followed him to his lair and observed him dancing and chanting. And by the way, the dwarf thing is not a comment about Marco Rubio, who is smaller than the other guys, but certainly no dwarf. Sorry, that was bad. And chanting, Es ist gut, dass niemand weiß, dass ich Rumpelstiltskin heiß. And I guess it's originally in German, but it means, it's good that no one knows my name is Rumpelstiltskin. Foiled, the dwarf stamped one foot into the ground up to his waist, and then grabbed his other foot and tore himself in half. Bad writers imitate and good writers steal, said T.S. Eliot, and I have stolen the designation Trumpelstiltskin from my daughter Raquel, whose literary talent dwarfs mine, as it were. Trump spent 15 hours in enraged silence after the Cruz victory and then tweeted, again, do not get mad at me here. I'm simply passing this on. You all who go to my Trump Nation channel better be able to deal with this, and this is not the last time I'm going to do something like this. Okay, and then tweeted, Ted Cruz didn't win Iowa. He stole it. That is why all the polls were so wrong and why he got far more votes than anticipated. Bad. And an hour later, he tweeted, based on the fraud committed by Senator Ted Cruz during the Iowa caucus, either a new election should take place or Cruz results nullified. And again, the state of Iowa should disqualify Ted Cruz from the most recent election on the basis that he cheated. A total fraud. Trump later explained that the alleged fraud consisted of two actions by the Cruz campaign. The first was an email citing news media reports that Ben Carson was considering quitting the race. Such a report had just appeared on CNN, in fact. The second was a mailing to Iowa voters with an official-looking format citing, quote, voter violations, namely a low turnout rate in past Iowa caucuses. The point of the mailing was to shame voters into attending the caucuses because a high turnout helped Cruz. It is strange to cry fraud over an effort to get more duly registered voters to the polls. Good point there by Goldman. Neither of these constitutes a dirty trick in the usual meaning of the term. No one hacked the Trump campaign computers or let the air out of the tires of his private jet. Cruz played rough, to be sure, but not dirty. That is the sort of thing a prospective president, not to mention a serving president, has to do. Cruz wants to win, and evidently will go right up to the line of acceptable behavior to do so, but he did not cross it. Cruz won Iowa through massive preparation on the ground, as well as painstaking parsing of the issues. He managed to persuade Iowa farmers that a level playing field in the energy market would increase demand for ethanol, and hence for the Iowa corn from which it is made, and help them more than the federal ethanol subsidy. One more time, I'm just the messenger here. If you like Trump that much, and this is the Trump Nation YouTube channel, be ready to, go through the arguments or go to the comments section here and see what other people are saying in response. I'll read you a few of them later. But back to what David Goldman writes. No one doubts that Cruz, a former national college debating champion, is exceptionally bright. Most exceptionally bright people cannot resist the temptation to wing it simply because they can. Not so Cruz. He combines high intelligence with enormous discipline and capacity for work. Betsy McCoy, a former Republican lieutenant governor of New York, observes that self-discipline of this kind bespeaks humility. He is smart enough to know that even smart people can make big mistakes, and that hard work is the best insurance against missteps. Humility is not a personality trait one immediately associates with a politician who has opposed virtually all his colleagues in the Senate. But it is required to solicit and obtain the support of grassroots leaders, as Cruz did. The American public is in a surly mood and cheers a flamboyant figure who, quote, tells it like it is, responding to difficult questions with answers that are simple, clear, and wrong, as H.L. Mencken put it. In the past, swaying local leaders, business associations, trade unions, clergy, media, and politicians was the key to winning elections because most ordinary voters looked to leading citizens they knew personally to guide their votes. That won Iowa for Ted Cruz. Whether the citizens of other states perform the old-fashioned selection process to reality show politics remains to be seen. Trumpelstiltskin, meanwhile, has revealed a side of his character that voters hitherto have ignored or even admired in a perverse way. He inherited wealth and ran a private company the way he wanted to, saying what he wanted and hiring and firing whom he pleased without answering to partners, shareholders, or the general public. He is not a particularly good businessman. Had he invested his inheritance in a stock market index fund, his net worth would be double what it is today. But the psychic rewards of unrestricted narcissism more than compensated for the underperformance of his portfolio. He has had the opportunity to retain the infantile instincts of a child of wealth into his dotage. He cannot bear to lose. He cannot even bear to accept part of the responsibility for a loss. In a bitter response to the vote fraud charge, Cruz warned that if Trump had his finger on the nuclear button, we might wake up one morning and find out that Donald had nuked Denmark. That is an exaggeration, but Trump betrays the sort of personality traits that would make for a president from hell. That's the end of the column. You're welcome to be angry, but absorb it. Absorb these kinds of arguments, because anything said now will be said later on, and you really should read David Goldman's stuff, even if he's not for Trump. Oh, let me read you a couple comments here. From Aldo David, 33, Yahoo. A lot of these guys are obsessed with Israel. David Goldman's Jewish, observantly as I am. And, that's their agenda. And keep in mind, by the way, that Trump's daughter converted to Judaism. If you are going to be so pro-Trump because you hate Israel, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But I like what Daryl Harb wrote. It is interesting, whether you agree with it or not. Trump reminds me of Kim Jong-un, another pudgy rich kid with an abrasive personality who wants to hog all the toys. I don't know about Trump being pudgy. He's really not. He looks like him to be in pretty good shape. Daryl Harb, the commenter, should be in such good shape when he gets to Trump's age. John Wells, here's a typical comment. The only reason Goldman doesn't like Trump is because stated he would not rule out spying on the nuclear Goliath of the Middle East, Israel. And then someone else agrees with him. Actually, most of these comments kind of suck. David, you got to get better commenters sometimes. Something obscene regarding Israel. Okay. Israel lobby. Oh, yeah, here's a good response to John Wells by David Goldman. John Wells writes, he forgot the part about voters being told at the voting places that Carson was quitting by Cruz political hacks and by Representative King, Cruz supporter via Twitter. Cruz prostrated himself in the victory acceptance speech to the Israel lobby apartheid regime, making him the #1 fifth columnist politician running for president. But David Goldman responded to this one himself. Nonsense. Trump's daughter, Ivanka, converted to Judaism and is highly observant. I know the rabbi who supervised her conversion. Trump is pro-Israel through and through. You paranoid anti-Semites, I know it's an oxymoron, think everything has to be about the Jews. In this case, it has nothing to do with the Jews. Cruz is a tough realist who wants to exercise power effectively. Israel is the most powerful state in the Middle East, a source of important military technology for the U.S. and the most stable state in the region. Why shouldn't Cruz want to ally with Israel? But I'm sure John Wells, maybe he can pleasure himself with a video of Obama at the mosque on YouTube. It continues. Let me read you this. More from John Wells. Finally, David, what does Trump's daughter have to do with your position or my post?
You Israel firsters who believe Americans, politicians' litmus test is how much they can align with Israel's position is un-American. If being opposed to Israel's policies makes one an anti-Semite, that would make you an anti-American and Netanyahu an anti-American because they took issue with President Obama, e.g. America, as it relates to the Iranian deal. Face it, David, the world in general, especially the European democracies, are fully aware of what is right and what is wrong. And Israel clearly, based on informed world opinion, is wrong with its policies towards their own people and their continued settlements, depriving their own people who have lived in that area for millennia. I mean, I'm not going to be the one, I'll give you David Goldman's response, of their birthright in favor of foreigners who immigrate to Israel based solely on their religion. Not nationality, not genealogical ancestry. Israel's policy are more closely resembling apartheid fascism than democracy. That's from the brilliant John Wells. And here's David Goldman's response. John William Wells is a diarrhea commenter, and I just can only imagine about the psycho-anatomical issues there. But David Goldman responded to that one, and this is the last thing I'm going to mention here. You Jew haters are as ignorant as you are self-deluding. Jews have prayed thrice daily for 2,000 years to return to Zion, and to say that Israel has nothing to do with Judaism is like saying that the Vatican has nothing to do with Catholicism. This millennia business is as dumb as the old argument that Cleopatra was black. Most of the Arabs in Israel, as of 1948, were economic immigrants who came because the Jews reclaimed the land and created jobs. There followed a population exchange, well, directly an exchange. 700,000 Arabs left, 800,000 Jewish expulsees from Muslim countries came, and no one is going to unbreak that glass. As for Israel, in what other country in the Middle East do Arabs have one man, one vote, equal protection under the law, and access to world-class universities? A fifth of Israeli medical students are Arabs. What Arab country do you hold out as an example of good governance and prosperity? The Europeans, to be sure, are appeasing their own Muslim populations by bashing Israel. Meanwhile, Israel's relations with Russia, China, and India are excellent. Your arguments are all flimsy pretexts for Jew hatred, and Jew hatred is the mark of Cain of the mediocre and jealous. Well, I think mediocrity may be even a stretch for John Wells, but that's just my opinion. Anyhow, this is Adam at Trump Nation.